So society itself and its vagaries need to be protected against. There needs to be protection against the tendency of society to impose, by other means than civil penalties, its own ideas and practices as rules of conduct on those who dissent from them. Now we skip down a bit. Here's an extremely strong statement of this issue or principle. All that makes existence valuable to anyone depends on the enforcement of restraints upon the actions of other people. So anything that's valuable to any person is dependent on other people having been restrained from certain actions, violations, and so. He says any value anybody has is dependent upon people being restrained from taking it from you, violating you. Think about that. Next time you list your values and you wonder what values so-and-so has, if they have any values and so on, what values are important to you. And think about that fact that every single value you have and the whole of them put together are secured to you only by limitations placed on other people's behavior. That's called society. That's called government. Then he mentions that some rules of conduct have to be imposed by law, and some can be imposed by opinion, which are not, quote, fit subjects for the operation of law. So things where we don't want to use the gun in the jail cell, we can just chastise people and ostracize them and stuff like that. Now we skip a couple of pages down. Now Britain was in a bad way at the time, but it wasn't yet on its way out. The empire wasn't yet crumbling, though it would soon begin to crumble. So here's an interesting line. He talks about people's attitude towards government, and he says that people are generally against new controls by the government, encroaching on their freedoms, where these things haven't been controlled in the past. There's just general opposition to it. And this comes from a habit of looking on the government as representing an opposite interest to the people. So, in the early 1800s, there's still some of this, in the mid-1800s, there's still some of this hatred or dislike, at least, of the government's growing and encroaching more and more on the individual. Compare that today to places like America, Germany, Britain today, when there's any problem at all, like the banks have some loans that fail, or a car, the throttle sticks on some cars, on a model of car, and somebody says, where was the regulation? Where was the oversight? And we set up new oversight and new regulations, just like that. We never mind putting in some new regulations and oversight. And the question is always, why wasn't there regulation and oversight before? Compare that to a culture which said, no, we don't need the regulation and oversight. We haven't had it before, and you can bug off. It's a different type of culture, and they were able to spread their culture around the world, and they made what is today the world's largest functioning republic or democracy, India, and they made Australia an economic powerhouse with fewer citizens than the state of California, and South Africa, which is a bit of a mess, but an industrialized and wealthy state as par Africa. Britain did a lot, and they did it with this type of culture where the people didn't like the government butting in, just on principle, just basic principle. If the government hasn't done it before, they shouldn't be doing it now. That was their idea. Now he asserts that the problem that he's looking at is, he says there's an absence of principle about when the government should interfere. Quote, one side is at present as often wrong as the other. So there are two sides to the issue of when the government should interfere. Both sides are frequently wrong. The interference of government is, with about equal frequency, improperly invoked and improperly condemned. So there are times when people on both sides of the issue who think they're battling each other, they say the government should do this and shouldn't do that, and John Stuart Mill says they're wrong in many, many cases. So he wants to say, let's set down the principles of what the government should do. Quote, the object of this essay is to assert one very simple principle, as entitled to govern absolutely the dealings of society with the individual in the way of compulsion and control, whether the means used be physical force in the form of legal penalties or the moral coercion of public opinion. That principle is, so here's what he wants to say that this essay demonstrates or proves. Here's what he wants to say the people of his day lack. They didn't appreciate or understand this principle. He says this is should govern absolutely the dealings of society with the individual. Here's the principle. The sole end for which mankind are warranted, individually or collectively, in interfering with the liberty of action of any of their number is self-protection. Let's do it one more time. The sole end for which mankind are warranted in interfering with the liberty or action of someone is self-protection. There's only one thing that you can interfere with or limit the liberty of someone on. Only one end, goal, value, and that is self-protection. Nothing else besides protecting yourself. Not giving your kids a good education, not getting the government to give you a free road to get to work, not anything except bodily protecting you from harm or damage. That's the only principle which allows you to interfere with another person's liberty. He says that's the purpose of his essay. Now he says that you may see a citizen who you know very well that it would be better for him to do this or that because it will make him happier, because it'll make him look better in the opinions of others, because it would be wise to do so or right to do so. He says if you see a citizen about to do something that'll damage that citizen himself, but it's not going to hurt anybody else, just damage that citizen, he says these are good reasons for remonstrating with him, trying to argue with him, or reasoning with him, or persuading him, or entreating him, but not for compelling him. So he says you can do all kinds of things to change his mind, but you can't use physical force against him. You cannot visit on him any evil in case he do otherwise. Quote, to justify that, the conduct from which it is desired to deter him must be calculated to produce evil to someone else. To justify interfering with a person, you have to show that what they were doing was going to harm some other person. Then he puts in a note to misintegrators, people like Steph Bott and Aaron0883. We are not speaking of children. Those who are still in a state to require being taken care of by others must be protected against their own actions as well as against external injury. So if you're not even able to take care of yourself, then we can put certain limits on your liberty that'll prevent you from hurting yourself. But that's because you're not able to take care of yourself. But some people say that they'll let a 6-year-old drink and drive cars if they want and stuff. Some people say that kind of stuff. So he says, obviously we're not talking about that. We're talking about people who can take care of themselves, and you cannot interfere with them, no matter what you think they should be doing, unless they're gonna hurt somebody. Now he says something that's pretty creepy. He says, despotism is a legitimate mode of government in dealing with barbarians, provided, and he just says that without any compunction, provided the end be their improvement. So there's his utilitarian side coming out. We're trying to improve the barbarians so you can use despotism against them instead of letting the barbarians have their own say-so. Now, I would say, okay, as long as the despotism is, from now on you can't hurt other people, from now on you can't burn women on death piers out in the, when their husband dies, they burn the woman and stuff. From now on you can't do that. If that's what he means, okay. But if he means actual despotism and hurting the individuals, well, the only way that that'd be justifiable is large-scale warfare to protect this society. But anyways, we're getting a bit off track.